Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll start by just introducing everyone. I'm sure most people in Australia probably know you guys anyway, but just for people who don't, and then we'll kind of crack on. Delighted, really excited for this one. Nervous and excited personally, because I didn't know anything about NFL a week ago, and I still don't know anything about NFL. But what I do know,
AFL.
Good start.
There we go. What I do know is there are 18 teams. We are fortunate enough to have, and every single team has a podiatrist, and within them that they've developed this AFL Podiatry Association, which just sounds like an amazing model that so many other sports and countries can learn from. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. We've got 5 people on at the moment. I think we have a 6th joining us. So a third of the team's podiatrists are with us. So thanks so much to all of you for joining us. Just run through your names and your teams. Benny from the North Melbourne Kangaroos, Emma from the Western Bulldogs, Nicki from the Hawthorn Hawks, Todd from the Geelong Cats, Tom from the Adelaide Crows, and not here yet, but joining us later will be Rick from the St Kilda Saints. Hopefully I've pronounced all those correctly. So thank you so much for coming, and we might just crack on and field a question straight to Emma, if that's okay, because I'm reliably informed that without her, this AFL sort of Podiatry Association probably wouldn't have ever really taken off. So Emma, do you mind telling us a bit about what this association is and how it all came about, and how, if other people are looking to do it, they could possibly take steps to do that as well?
Yeah, look, I guess a lot of us already knew each other. So of the times, a lot of us were already friends, just through sort of professional networks, etc. And based on modelling from the AFL Doctors Association and AFL Physiotherapy Association that already exists, we thought we'd sort of come together, form our association, increase our professional network amongst ourselves, and then that provides us an opportunity to, cross-reference, develop our skills within our own group, increase our professional profiles as individuals and as a profession, so increase that sort of profile of pods who are involved in sports medicine in elite sports teams, and then hopefully provide future education to any new podiatrists who come on board and work with the current AFL teams or future AFL teams, and also provide professional education to other podiatrists out there who are working with other footballers at any level around Australia.
That's awesome. And it doesn't happen in any other sport, even in Australia. It doesn't happen in rugby, to your knowledge.
I think the others might be able to correct me, but I think I'm correct in saying there's no other podiatrist association with NRL or anything like that either.
No.
Yeah.
You're not that I know.
Yeah, actually, can I just say, I think I've been lucky enough to visit with an NBA basketball team, with a European soccer team, and obviously travel a lot and talk to a lot of podiatrists all over the place. And from what my observation is, the level of podiatry involvement in AFL is way beyond literally any other professional league in the world, let alone other codes within Australia. And that was part of the motivation for actually wanting to put this together. So I think that's, and I think that's what we want to hear more of. And I think the fact that this association exists is testament to that.
Yeah, I agree. I saw some photos on social media of you guys all together as a big, AFL podiatry team. I think it was an annual meeting or a CPD. I think Bish was there doing a talk. Is that going to be? Is that like a little conference for you guys, or do you guys meet regularly, or because you're obviously all friends?
So I can continue answering that.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry, Emma. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, the awkward pause. That was officially a meeting as a collective. So I said we spoke about this sort of, it's probably the idea of forming a formal association's been thrown around for a year or two. We've caught up with each other at different conferences, and finally we got it off the ground towards the end of 2017. So I think it was 3 weekends ago we met for PD day, so to speak, where everyone came to Melbourne. I think we had 15 clubs represented, which was pretty impressive for the first day. And the plan is to move that forward, making it an annual event.
Awesome. So I've got a question. I'll try and share the questions around now. Got a question for, I'll send it in Nicki's direction, if that's okay. What are the demands of an AFL team on podiatry? So are you there every single day at the training ground? Are you going in once a week? Are the players coming to see you in your private practice? How does it work for people that aren't involved but want to know that?
So during the season, most of us would be there 1 to 2 hours a week. So reasonably small commitment compared to what a lot of the other medicos in the team are doing. The physios often laugh and say, oh, your job's so easy because you only have to be here for such little amount of time compared to us having to travel with the team every weekend. During the pre-season, we've got to get through screenings for 44 players. So we do, we all kind of, between 15-minute, half an hour screenings with each player, where we have a look at their shoes, current injuries, orthotics, biomechanical assessment. I video everybody as well each year, just so I've got it there on reference. So it's difficult sometimes in the pre-season because the players are away a lot as well with training camps. So I try and fit in where I can. So some weeks I might be there for, 6 or 8 hours getting through some screenings, and other weeks I'm not there at all. But my commitment for the season is, for the home and away season, is only 70 hours. And then once we get to finals, if they needed more time, then, we just go along from there. But yeah, about 70 hours, which works out, pretty well, gets us through the home and away season. And then the players will come and see me in my private clinic if they need any other help, during the week when I'm not at the club, or I'll get phone calls and things like that as well. So what's my game commitment, or what's our game commitment? I think across the board, none of us have really got a game day role. I used to go down sometimes if they needed some padding and taping before the game, but we've got 3 physios now, so I'll often get that sorted during the week and, give them a heads up on what sort of tape we need, and do the padding during the week as well. So I'll sometimes just go and watch the game, which is fantastic, but no game day role. But I think the Sydney does. Michael Kinchington.
Sure. I was just follow up one comment you made there, and you said something about when the finals come around, you just take it from there. You've obviously had a lot of experience in the finals. For those that missed that joke, Nicki's obviously works with Hawthorn, who've won 3 of the last 4 finals or something like that.
We've had 4 premierships since I've been there, but
okay, yeah.
Just who's counting?
The difference.
Correlation, causation. Can I ask a screening question? I might just send this one over to Tom, if that's okay.
Sure.
What sort of screening do you do at the club? Because obviously in all sports, there's this big debate about screening the uninjured players and the lack of predictive models we have of injury. Yet one of the most common ones we use in the UK in soccer is the lunge test, which I believe I'm right in saying came out of some research that was on AFL in the AFL setting anyway. So what sort of stuff are you doing for screening your sort of young or uninjured players? What sort of tests are you regularly doing?
Yeah, really good question. Straight off the bat, that would be one thing that I would look at as well. It would be an ankle lunge test, but I heard sort of Nicki say, when we were talking about this the other week, where you might spend, you've got 45 players to get through. You've got players needing to get on the track. So time can be against you when you're sort of going through this process as well. And I sort of spent a long time on my initial screening that I did at the club when I started 3 or 4 years ago. And I've actually workshopped that each year. And I've cut things out, added things in. And it also has to sort of fit in or tie in at the same time with the medical screening and also a physiotherapy screening. So I don't want to be doubling up on tests, for example, as well, that they'd be looking at as well, because we're getting sort of one that's obviously not efficient, and 2 is obviously time. So getting back to so specifics, I guess for me is it's really hard. Initially I took things like, I tried to find, okay, what reliable tests can I look at? But you find yourself just getting information for the sake of information. You use foot posture or something like that, and I found myself, what's the point in doing this, especially for uninjured people? So it really, for me, became largely about footwear, about screening, I guess, generally joint ranges of motion, things like that, any sort of history of previous injury, basically finding anyone that needed follow-up at that particular point. That's sort of the purpose of the screening, I guess. So I've probably tailored it a little bit, for example, to use an example, tailored it a little bit more recently in that using, depending on how many sort of new recruits you might get each year. So, some years you might not have any and other years you might have more, and spending more time with them because it's their first exposure to that environment and bringing them up to speed with, I guess, sort of what their requirements are, for example, from a footwear point of view, straight off the bat. And this might be for, young men that are 18 years old. So they might have had, one pair of boots that lasted them a season from mum and dad, and now they've potentially got sponsorship, they've got access to a lot more product and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of it might be just an opportunity in the screening to touch base with a player and start that education process as well. Does that sort of answer the question?
Yeah, Tommy, I use that as well. I reckon it's a really good time to build that relationship with the new players as well. And like you're saying, often they've been screened by the physios or the strength and conditioning, so you're the third person in line. But getting that education into the new players especially, and I suppose following up on anything that the physios or the doctors or that might target for you and say, look, can you have a look at this player? We think X, Y, and Z, and follow it up there. So, yeah,
the other point I would make as well that I thought of is that often when people have asked me, well, what do I do in that process? Perhaps they think that because it's an elite environment as well, we do these, complex 3D gait analysis on every player as a screening or something like that. And it's quite the opposite. You're actually trying to find the 1%ers, to sound cliche, but you're trying to find the really small stuff that needs following up on as well. And that might even be skin lesions. That might be sort of a player that's having issues with blistering because of a shoe fitting issue that needs following up. And that sort of stuff can be vital and be really important when their training loads then progress and get that they're not having an issue that a really simple issue that could have been followed up, and that's obviously a win-win from the screening point of view.
That's a really interesting point, Tom, because I had an experience where a draftee on day one at the club presented. We were doing a screening and he hadn't mentioned it to me, but I was like, looks like you've got an ingrown toenail. And he's like, oh yeah, I had that treated 6 weeks ago. And so that something as simple as that meant that we had to coordinate when we were going to perhaps do something about that when he could have some time off legs, because he was going to be running, more and more as the preseason went on. But we wanted to get that first month of preseason out of the way before we sort of took him off legs for 3 or 4 days. So it can be really simple.
Mm. Actually, can I just ask Tom?
Sorry,
Tom. Tom, you just mentioned something about you're not obviously doing 3D gait analysis. I vaguely recall a few press stories over the years about some clubs buying 3D gait systems, but no one's using them, are they? Or was that just media hype at the time?
Not to my knowledge. No.
Yeah, no, I know some clubs did purchase them, but it didn't go anywhere.
I think the thing with screening, the talks we have, with our group physios, medical S&C, is really, making sure that whatever we're doing from a screening point of view, it has a purpose, and that there's some follow up. We just don't create, a whole bunch of information about a profile of someone which is meaningless or not used. It then sort of becomes pointless, which is challenging. Yeah, well, we got to do something, but working out what we do, and I'm talking more perhaps biomechanical, muscle strength, joint range of motion, all this sort of stuff.
Sure.
Mm.
It comes in nicely to one of the questions we were asked beforehand, which was the question on the sort of the spectrum of things you're seeing. People think about where they watch the game and they see how physical it is, and they're assuming all injuries are sort of sexy, sort of musculoskeletal problems. And I saw that one of Collingwood's players, Daniel Wells, has just done a Liz Frank, and that's a big injury, so to speak, a possible season ender. So what sort of stuff? I'll point this one to Todd, if that's okay. What sort of stuff are you seeing, sort of week in, week out? Is it all MSK, or is it, like you say, a bit more sort of skin lesion stuff, or just a mix of the two?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing in that I think it's. I'd like to think if I've done my work in the pre-season and got things sorted the way I want them, then I should be just managing little bits of skin lesions and nails and things like that in season. And hopefully your work that you've done in that pre-season means you're not working as hard in season. But the most common types of injuries, I suppose, I've written a few down. Those, obviously, Achilles and plantar fascia stuff seems to come through in that transition where the guys go out of running shoes predominantly and into boots. And that's an interesting transitional phase. You're still seeing some hallux limitus, hallux rigidus in some of the older guys in particular, and having to manage that can be problematic. Sometimes we've had a couple that I can think of, midfoot sprains, and Daniel Wells is the one that everyone's talking about at the moment, where he's had that loose frank. And even some guys with intermetatarsal lesions versus neuromas, those kinds of things. They're probably the common things that we seem to see, as well as the skin lesions and nail issues being stood on, particularly in the ruckman. The ruckmans tend to trip over their own feet and stand on one another's feet, and the nails tend to go a bit gnarly as they do.
It's a pretty dynamic game, Ian, as you might have seen on the internet. And we're saying 360-degree contact, a lot of twisting and turning, and the players get up to speeds of 36 kilometres an hour, and then they've got to also run the midfielders up to 14 kilometres in the game as well. So I sort of try and explain it to people. You're running a half marathon. Every 200 metres, you're getting bashed up or wrestled to the ground. You've got to get back up, and then you're having people jump out of the trees and knee you in the back as well. So there's a lot of loading going on, and it's a bloody tough game. So there's plenty of work definitely in our job as well.
Yeah, actually, just on that, Ben, about it being a tough game, it's really interesting, especially like obviously my background interest has always been in rugby, but the same with an AFL. Like it used to be known as a hard game played by hard men, but now, and this is the change I think is happening most, but it's now a place of work, and workplace safety has now become a big issue. So it's not the sort of, I mean, you look back at some of the old clips about when the people get concussed, they carried on.
Yeah, 100%. There's a game in pre-season games they take out to the regional centres and try and expose it to the country guys. And there was a game in Wangaratta one year that I was part of, and it poured with rain just beforehand, and we were all getting ready, getting stripped down, ready to go. And Benny Gale, who was the head of the Players Association at the time, walked out in the ground and actually called the game off because it was an unsafe workplace. So, and that was probably early 2000, and I reckon it's getting more and more like that. And it's true, these guys are getting paid huge amounts of money. They've got big sponsorships, and if they're off the field for 8 weeks because of a hard ground like a certain player, then they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, it's just that whole focus on workplace health and safety. It's on the sporting field and in a big way now.
We had a question about footwear, about the footwear worn. Might point this one towards you, Ben, if that's okay. As I know you used to play a little bit as well, as I was told. For those of us in the UK that haven't seen much AFL, are they identical to football boots in their design? If so, or if not, what are the requirements of the footwear worn during AFL based on the way you just described the sport?
Yeah, very similar to the soccer boots. We call it soccer. You guys call it football.
Sorry, soccer.
No, that's right. But the only footy boot brand that's made for AFL is actually ASICS, and we had the ASICS rep talk to us at the association catch up that we just recently did. But you're right. You need, same as soccer in terms of you need to have that grip and that traction on the field, and the field can vary from a really hard ground pre-season where you I suppose want to go for softness and short studs to middle of winter, softer grounds, the rain's coming down and you sort of need that extra traction. So maybe go for a longer studded boot in that regard. we had a discussion as well, and we all thought that the boots are starting, or especially the European style boots, so Adidas and Nike, are getting very slim fit and very very narrow, because the soccer players like that bit of extra touch and feel, and being a bit more lower profile on the ground. So we've had a spate recently of plantar fascia injuries and forefoot injuries in the AFL, and heel fat pad injuries as well. That maybe it's due to that a lot of the European brands have gone pretty slim fit and not getting that protection from the footwear that we normally have.
Yeah, and obviously the challenges that we then get when we're trying to put something inside the footwear. Not from an accommodation point of view, might actually divert this one to Emma, just because I feel like she hasn't spoken for very long, if that's okay. And also because I know she's got links with ice hockey, another sport renowned for people who like their boots very, very tight. So when it comes to foot orthoses, do you find players putting up a bit of a fight if you want to squeeze something in what's already quite a slim fitting and tight boot?
Look, you're always going to have in any sport players who like to do their thing. It's my nice way of putting it. But look, some boots are better at, it's my polite way of putting it, some boots are better at accommodating, inserts, heel lifts, orthoses, anything that you add to a boot better than others. It comes down, can we remove that sort of shoe liner or sock liner to find a couple of extra millimetres of depth to use? Again, as Benny's just mentioned, that some of those European boots are becoming slimmer and tighter, which is restricting and limiting sort of the room to move within the boot. You add a foot, you add something else in, and the boys sort of do find the boot a bit too congested and snug. So you do what you need to do and you work around it, and you start making lower profile devices if you need to, or worst case, you politely bully the player into changing the model of boot they might be wearing if it's a medical requirement.
Our physios do a lot of taping as well, Ian. So I'll often find at our club that we'll, do a low dia tape, for example, when they're in their low profile boots. And then, probably at training during the week, if I can get them doing a bit more in a grass cat style or, sitting in their runners when they're at the gym, then we protect them at those other times. But a lot of our players don't like having too much inside their boots unless, like a really low profile prefab. Heel lifts we can normally get away with a lot of the time, but using tape is massive for our club.
But it's obviously working for you when it comes to finals. Any rough estimates on percentages of the entire AFL players that might be wearing devices? When I often speak to lay patients that play football, soccer in here, when you're trying to give them something, the first thing they like to know is how many of the Premier League players are wearing these. So any ballpark numbers? I might who should I stitch up with this one? Tom, what do you think?
Thanks, mate. I'd really be stabbing the perhaps as you asked the question, I actually thought, well, probably goes for any issue, whether it's a prefabricated device, perhaps a heel raise, any other sort of padding or insole, anything we're sticking in there that is going to have a mechanical effect. So probably should be considered. I don't know, 50%? Is that too high? I don't know. Guys, help me out.
I'd have 40%, I reckon, at North that wear either an orthotic or a form-orthotic type of device in their boots.
Yeah.
I was going to say about 25 at our club, but a lot of them have got padding. I often grind a stud off, under their first MTP joint, put heel lifts in, modify heel counters if needed as well. But probably from a device point of view, we'd be about, 25.
Yeah, 25 is about our rough number, about 25%. But if you were talking about some form of in-shoe or boot modification, it could be closer to 60 or 70%. But
so they'll be wearing those orthotics in the game, or that
varies. Yeah, some do, and some just prefer the feel of tape. That's a case by case scenario, I think.
I think the players that need to wear them often understand, and we've had a situation at our club where you wish you'd been able to get them to put something in earlier from a preventative point of view, but he didn't want anything inside his boot and then ends up with a more significant injury as a result, and now he's wearing them in his boot. So, that's a situation that often is a little bit frustrating, I suppose, but that's just how it goes.
Yeah. Actually, that leads into a question that we've just had. And, hang on, I've lost it. Oh, hang on. Sorry. I've just got to refresh my screen. It was a question from Simon Barthold, and it was actually directed to you, Ben. But actually, before I get to that, he's also made another comment. I think it's directed at you, Emma. He said Power currently up by 33 points. Is that your game? That was
currently playing.
Spoiler alert.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. No. Well, the question that Simon asked, and it follows on nicely from the athletic question about alternatives to foot athletics, and what Simon said is that since kids or the younger players are taught to keep the centre of mass low, which can induce a specific gait style for running, that might have implications for things like hamstring strains and can affect speed. So do any of you guys get involved with gait retraining, especially sprint coaching, to reset this? So he sort of directed that at you, Ben, but I just, anyone can chip in.
Yeah, look, as I think it was Nicki commented earlier, we're only there 3 or 4 hours a week. And so as Simon will know, with the gait retraining, you've actually got to be there every day and giving the players verbal cues and really working with them one-on-one for a significant period of time. He makes an excellent point, and I'm sure that the feedback that we give to the physios and the strength and conditioning guys, would, if we saw that as an issue, we'd definitely pass that on. But they'd be the ones that mainly drive that because they're there day in, day out.
Are they doing much of that?
Yeah, a lot of them, especially, I suppose it's more so after an injury or something like that. They'll see, okay, why did we have an injury? What do we need to do to offload this area or to strengthen up another area? And if they can find a deficit somewhere, change their gait retraining, change their gait style a little bit, then prevent an injury occurring, I think that's where that type of facility comes in.
I find it really interesting looking at a new player when they're first drafted and you come in and they do their first screening with you, to then 12 months down the track or even another couple of years down the track, look at the changes in their gait. But that's mainly related to the strength stuff that they are then doing as part of being at the club as well, that they'll get a natural improvement in their running technique as a result of being stronger when they've had deficits as well. So that's all identified through the screening and through the strength conditioning team as well, particularly their proximal strength as well.
Yeah. Kind of depends how you define gait retraining as well. Perhaps where I totally agree with what Ben said, but probably more often than not, our physios and strength and conditioning staff and doctors, etc., addressing things through load management and type of running and type of training that they're doing, which has implications on their mechanics and their gait, rather than actually training them to run a different way. Is that fair? Does everyone agree with that? Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I know that in our environment, it's a case of stay in your lane. Your scope is what you are here to do is podiatry related. We've got a sprint coach that we employ for 3 months of the year through the pre-season. If we think that the gait retraining is something we want to focus on, then that'll be something that they address. Me, if I'm only there twice a week or 2 hours a week, it's not going to be something I delve into.
Okay, so I'm just catching up with the comments.
Loads of questions that have come in off the back of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just got to say something Barthold just said about you. He said this was more a question to do with learning to sprint with a sprint coach. Bloke like Benny busting through the middle with competitors in his wake.
I'll tell you what, Simon should have helped me. I went to him as a youngster and my gait didn't improve one little bit. So he's got some, I could have played 300 games if he'd helped me out.
Craig, while you're working through those questions, just a quick one I've got off the back of some of the things that have been said. Obviously, you guys have got this really unique and amazing setup where you're all at different clubs, but you're all friends, you're all speaking, you're all meeting. Is there any plans, or do you collect any data for research purposes? Any plans in sort of doing any kind of studies or gathering any kind of epidemiological data to sort of publish at a later date, given that you're in this unique position where you could essentially do it as an entire league team? I might ask that one. Emma, I might ask Emma that one as the big boss, so to speak.
Yeah, look, it was discussed at our PD day last month that the AFL does release an injury report each year. That's primarily the doctors and the team physio's data. And we did sort of discuss, should we do a lower limb foot injury report, so to speak, because the AFL one isn't quite specific as to what injury. It might just say, foot injury or ankle injury. So it is sort of in our discussions and plans. We are fairly sort of new at this as an association, but I think it would be beneficial to start looking at, what are those foot injuries, like breaking them down to actual diagnosis, etc., and then working out, can we use that in relation to boot education and things like that. So it's in the infancy, but yes, we'll be starting to look at doing something in the future, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting, Emma. Just there's one question or comment that did come in. What is your view? There seems to be anecdotally be an increase in foot injuries overall. Things like plantar fasciosis are on the rise. Is that your impression, or?
I'm not sure if it's an impression or it's actually happening or it's being given more attention. We might find because of ground reports and things like that, it's been given more attention. I've been at the Bulldogs 4 years now. I wouldn't say I've had a dramatic increase in foot injuries. Every year there's a stress injury, things like that or two, but I wouldn't say I'm sort of in panic mode that, my guys are breaking down with lower limb or feet injuries at this stage.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, I'm just sidetracking into a totally different area. I just want to share my screen for a moment. I just want to show you
Wikipedia page again.
No, it wasn't that. I just wanted to comment on this and then ask a question about this. This is a book, probably one of the better books I've read recently, about athletes sacrificing their health in the future for wealth and fame now. So I think I sent you a copy, an extraordinarily fascinating read. And I remember quite a few years ago, when I was still at La Trobe, we consulted for one of the clubs who had a player who had a rupture to the lateral collateral ligament of the first MPJ, and he was playing every game with a local anaesthetic. So I just wanted to get some comments on the ethics of doing something like that. I'm sure if the news media got hold of that, there might have been a bit of a storm going around that. But the logic was they were going to get him through the season with playing with a local and operate at the end of the season. And we were asked, well, do you think anything in his shoe is going to help? So we did a whole lot of testing and couldn't find anything. I can't actually remember the player's name, but we probably shouldn't mention it. But you just get some comments on what you think of that kind of approach and how much that sort of thing goes on. Ben's getting ready.
The doctors are very careful these days. There was a famous incident with a Geelong player, Egan, who had a navicular, tried to get back for the grand final. They were going really well, and he ended up breaking down and not playing footy again. And he actually then ended up suing the doctor and the surgeon as well along the way. And it's made the doctors a lot more cautious with all that sort of stuff. They don't push the envelope at all. And more recent times, this concussion incidences are going up as well, and they're super, super cautious with that as well. So I'm finding that, the doctors will educate the players really well. They'll alert the pros and cons of everything. They'll put it they'll give their 2 bobs worth and make sure the player's totally clear on that. And then they'll sort of say to the player, if you want to go down this path, you've got to, basically give it the all clear. I'm not sure about others.
Yeah, well, that player I mentioned we talked to, he was very accepting of, what was happening to him with the local. And, God knows what that joint's doing now 10 years later.
I'll give you this though, Craig. One of the players at North has a boot sponsor who's giving him $50,000 to wear the boots, and I'm trying to get him out of these boots, and he's very reticent to do it, and he's trying to make me work every which way to get these boots more comfortable for him. And I sort of say to him, "Look, it's your career. It's this, it's that," and not sure what would you do.
That's an interesting point, though, isn't it? In that it is workplace. We're big on workplace safety, and so and if we're talking about occupational footwear in any other realm, we're kind of giving people occupational footwear advice. But then when they're being paid to wear these boots, that kind of muddies the waters, I think, somewhat.
We have a few players that are in that situation. We have one in particular who wears a boot that's sold commercially, but he has a different upper material on it, so it looks like what they're selling in the stores, but he's actually got a leather upper rather than synthetic upper on it. And then we've had a player for years who's no longer with our club that had a big sponsorship with one of the brands, and he needed some wedging in the back of his boot. So we would have to send them away to get the boot cut, to get a 10 mil lift put in the back of it, where he could have just changed his boot brand and it would have been a hell of a lot easier. But, that's all part of it. And we spoke about that at our conference, that it's probably one of the most challenging parts of working with a professional team is that they do have footwear sponsors, and that's part of the game.
Just on that sponsorship, did you say $50,000, Ben? Is that the kind of money we're talking about here?
Allegedly.
Yeah, that's... Sorry, I'm just a bit like, if it was a few thousand, you probably would forego the shoe, but that's a lot of money to forego. Yeah.
Is that the same they're paying you, Ben? Is that the same?
I had to pay for my boots, mate.
But maybe that book I just showed on the athlete's dilemma, that athletes sacrificing their current health for their wealth and fame for future health, should be compulsory reading for them all. I reckon it was a very fascinating book.
Just further, sorry, Craig. Just further.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Just further to the sponsorship. So the players are entitled to 2 pairs of runners and 3 pairs of boots that through their bargaining agreement. So I don't know the exact word for that, but that's what the club need to provide for them each season. So if they can't wear the brand, if you believe for a particular medical reason that they shouldn't be wearing the brand that the club are sponsored by or recommending for them, then we're able to recommend any brand of boot and any particular style of boot that we think they need, and then the club need to reimburse them for that. So that's only come in the last probably 4 or 5 years, and that has made life a lot easier for being a club podiatrist as well.
Okay. Sorry, we've just had a question literally on that. Can I Vishan's asked about the injury risk because they have to wear the boots they have to wear because of sponsorship. So we've sort of touched on that. So that was quite timely.
Quick question for me. I'm just drawing parallels with my experience with professional footballers. Some of the players, depending on who they are, there's like a hierarchy. They can pretty much if they're not Adidas, they can get flown back to Germany and they'll pretty much make whatever you want with inside the boot. Is that commonplace in AFL? Is it just certain players? Because hearing the stats that Nicki just said there about 2 pairs of runners, 3 pairs of boots for the season. Some of these Premier League footballers probably do a different pair of boots every week. So clearly the money is probably not that different. From what I've read, the big guys over your way get paid massive amounts. So the boot companies really helping out here? Are they playing ball or only with the big names?
Yeah, so with a player who's got an individual sponsorship with a brand, they might change their boots every 2 weeks. They'll go through 20 pairs in the season, whereas the younger players would probably go through the 3 pairs that the club provide for them. So it differs, I suppose, on their profile.
Got you. Makes sense. So there was a question about AFLW, which I'm guessing is the women's league. It's just gone off my screen. It was Daniel McManus that asked it, Craig. Can you find it?
No, I've got it right here. Yeah. Just any different injuries, any different issues I presume you were involved with the women's teams as well, or not all clubs had a women's team with them, but
Em's probably best placed to answer that. She's
okay. Yeah. Okay, Emma.
So Bulldogs have got the AFL women's team, which we'll say congratulations for their championship since Nicki's had it.
Take it while you can.
Yeah, no, live the dream while I can. But no, look, the women. I'm involved with the women's, but not as heavily as the men's program. So the men's program, I'm contracted to be there weekly. The women's, the way I work with them is I come in and do that pre-season screen with the women's roster, and then sort of on a needs basis, they get sent to me clinically. Injuries, I think a lot more of the girls' knees have been in trouble, so a lot more ACLs. That's a physical build. It's I think there's still stats being thrown around, research being thrown around, whether are these girls getting more sort of, those ACL style injuries because they're not accustomed to the high load and they're not accustomed to the contact, the torsional side-to-side nature of the AFL? Or is it actually a physiological difference between, the guys and the girls? But in the sense of injuries, I think the ones I see, I spoke of it earlier in the discussion, that it's the nails, it's the blisters, quite a few Achilles blow up and things like that. But I guess, it is what it is. I'm seeing quite similar sort of outcomes between the men's and the women's sense of injuries.
Okay.
Emma, would there anything you do in the screening for women and men that would differ? Would you screen them differently?
Probably just because of time restraints. It's probably forgive me, but a faster screen with the girls. There's a lot of the girls are new to AFL. A lot of them have come from club level or the tier 2, which is the VFL level. So it's easier, I guess, to screen the guys when they come in because each year you're screening the 44 guys on your main roster, but you've probably screened over half of them the year before, so you're working off some base data. With the women, the last 2 years I've screened them, their rosters changed significantly from the first year to the second year the league existed, and these girls have never had the attention they've had. They've never had a podiatrist screen them. They've never had an S&C. They've never had a physio screen them. So I spend a bit less time with them, but I probably am prescribing them runners for the first time in their life. I'm, sorting out their footy boots and recommending a model of boot for their foot type or biomechanics for the first time in their life. So it's sort of a more basic screen, but bigger outcomes for the actual individual girls. And the result and the thanks from the girls was quite sort of astronomical. They would send you messages saying, thanks for tonight, thanks for sorting my runners and boots, because they've simply never had this much attention and care given to them. So that was one, I guess, reward for myself. That they do listen, they do want to learn, and they do appreciate what you do.
Yeah.
Awesome. I've got another question. It's probably best for Emma, but actually everyone can answer. It's just about this model again. I just can't get over how cool this model is, that every club has a podiatrist and you all know each other and you're all friends and there's no bickering and you get together. I just really love the idea of that one day making it to the UK within our sports like football, rugby. How did it work? Did all clubs have a podiatrist first, and then you all kind of got together and said, "Hey, let's form this"? Or did you decide? Was there an association before every club had a podiatrist? How did it work?
I think so. In the sense of, in recent years, all the clubs have had sort of a assigned podiatrist. Nicki might be the best one to sort of respond in the sense that in the earlier days that not every club did have a podiatrist assigned. So it's a more modern thing that each club has, their contracted podiatrist. But look, it honestly is that we do cross paths at, the Sports Medicine Australia conference or the Australian Podiatry conference, etc. We know each other. We're not scared to communicate with each other, discuss cases confidentially. I think the Physio Association is a bit more tight-knit, that they don't wish to share, I got my player back in 5 weeks from his hamstring and you took 6, because I think they're a bit more scared to share the trade secrets on how to get players back recovered faster. But I guess we're all just fun, cool people, and, it works for us.
We had a unique situation where at a sports medicine at Olympic Park Sports Med Centre in Melbourne, there were 5 podiatrists. Ben was a bit more recent with North, but the rest of us all worked in an AFL club already, so we'd help each other out a little bit. If someone was on holidays or if you had an idea to bounce around, we'd actually help each other. And I just thought it's great, it was just always someone to chat to about, if you needed help with something, it didn't matter what team they played for or who they were. It was just a patient. So that, that was a really nice environment as well. And then this is an extension of that.
Yeah. And I think...
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, when at the last SMA conference, it was such an enthusiastic, energetic group that we shared ideas in that forum, and this was a natural extension of that. And as Nicki said, as a starting point, we're trying to support one another, so that even to the point where there's a little bit of uniformity about what we do from club to club, so that if because of the way player movement works in the AFL, I could end up with 3 of Nicki's patients from this year coming to Geelong for next year potentially. I'm not sure which ones we're going to target yet, but I'll let you know. But, so if we do some things completely different at Geelong to what they do at Hawthorn, then that kind of throws things out. But if there's a degree of uniformity across the competition, it reflects better on the profession, I think, as well.
Yeah, I'm desperately trying to work out how we would do this in England, how we would do this in the Premier League, for example. I might have to. That's probably an offline conversation for another day. But,
I'm happy to have a phone call with you.
genuinely, I mean that. I've had a question here. Who wins the finals this year? I don't know who wants to take that one first.
Kangaroos.
No messing.
It's very tight at the moment. We're in the mid-season break, I suppose. The clubs have a week off to rejuvenate, and still very, very even. Any club on their day can win. So up in the air. We can't. Anyone else got anything? Tommy, the Crows going all right?
Yeah, back into the season maybe. There we go. Yeah. Just on that point you made beforehand about establishing the group, I guess we've also got a large percentage of the competition or teams are based in one part of Australia, being Victoria. So those guys knew each other well, and I knew most of them, like Emma pointed out and Todd pointed out, through SMA conferences and things like that. So really, the group was then sort of born pretty quickly because it's let's just sort of formalize this because we're sort of all meeting once a year almost anyway. Let's get the ball rolling and actually formally meet and create something. So that's probably where that in that sense it made it pretty easy, I suppose.
Yeah.
To get it happening.
It should be easy in England because all of England is about half the size of Melbourne or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, I can't see how we couldn't get this to work, but I wonder whether there's a politics to it that would hold it back, that you guys don't seem to be bound by, which is awesome. But yeah, we'll talk about that more for sure. Any other questions, Craig?
I've actually got a comment question, but it's actually a Geelong related question. So let me just share my screen again. Now I can't access this. This is the Geelong Advertiser. It's asking me to subscribe. But it was about this story here about it wasn't that one. It was about I can't remember the player's name, who's currently got plantar fasciitis. But the reason it came to my attention was that Robert Harvey got a mention in the article. And pretty much every time any player in the AFL seems to get into the news media with plantar fasciitis, Robert Harvey's name comes up. And I can tell by the reactions, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We're talking about the Harvey floor banger, which, for those that don't know the story, Robert Harvey had a chronic plantar fasciitis, perhaps with a partial tear, and he decided to jump off a table of great height to turn into a partial rupture, which promptly healed up and he got back playing. So the things that players do, and it's we're talking, how long ago was that? 15 years at least that happened, but it still comes up in the media. So hang on, let me just stop my screen share. So I just wonder if you've got any comment on that kind of approach. I mean, how do you manage plantar fasciitis or plantar fasciopathy or plantar heel pain, what do you want to call it, without doing a Harvey floor banger? Anyone want to take that?
Clubs used to only do calf raises. That was their only foot and ankle strengthening stuff, and associated squats and lunges and stuff. Whereas now at North, we get Sue Mays, who's an Australian ballet physiotherapist, coming in and doing some individual intrinsic work, with the players one-on-one in the pre-season. They've got a dedicated program that they've got to do before their weight session or gym session. And any boys with previous foot and ankle pathologies, they've really got to, focus on that as part of their training. So I suppose that's that preventative pre-season conditioning that we hope plantar fascia doesn't do.
Sure. Do any of the players ask you about what Robert Harvey did? Does it come up, or?
I'll probably hear it in my clinic.
Oh,
It's kind of folklore, that story now.
Oh, I know. It's
I think patients, when they doctor Google heel pain, plantar fasciitis, etc., it comes up, and it's patients bring it up more so than footballers to myself.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, same.
Yeah.
I just tell them that he had a stress fracture in his metatarsals 3 weeks later because he lost his foot. And that,
did he? I didn't know that.
No, I don't think he did. But, just to scare them.
Not a rumour if it's true.
Yeah.
But it did heal up really quickly after he ruptured it, and it's
I think there was a heap of taping as well, though, Craig, and whether he had orthotics or not, I'm not sure, but I'm sure there was a pretty restrictive taping method that was applied for the rest of that season.
I heard a rumour he had a pair of Arts footwork devices.
Got it in there.
Yeah, he would have paid a bit for them then.
Yeah. Craig, I have exhausted all the questions here, and I'm conscious that if I ask anything else, I'll look foolish. So over to you.
Yeah. No, there's been a few other comments, a few other questions that we've sort of covered, but I guess I think one of probably them we've did actually just touch on this just before, but a good way to end would be, what about the new graduate who actually wants to get involved with the sports team down the track? So what advice would you go? So perhaps if we just go around the screen, perhaps start, well, in my screen, Todd's in the middle, so perhaps start with you, Todd. What advice would you give to a new graduate who wants to work with a sports team, not necessarily an AFL team, but a sports team, where they should go, what they should do?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And I know my involvement sort of started while I was still playing at country level, and from every second player asking you about, what should I do about boots, and what runners should I be wearing, or I've got these blisters. And that hands-on experience in at country level just prepares you to graduate. We're not doing anything radically different in the AFL landscape that I was doing, about nearly 15 years ago in country footy, and getting some hands-on experience in that environment is probably where I would start, and that helps to build your reputation and your capacity to deal with some of those things.
Yeah. Tom, what would you say?
Yeah, I guess all of us, without speaking for everyone, we're probably all at a stage of our careers where there wasn't really anything out there when we finished. And I know there's, and I don't actually know what it involves, and I'm not involved with it, but I know there is a sports career framework that's come out now as well.
Yeah, that's
it's about good. Yeah, which is sort of in its infancy, but there's people working their way through that. So that's a good starting point. And like Todd said, probably just getting involved at any level is probably a good starting point. Immerse yourself in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Ben, we know your pathway to getting there.
Yeah, or be an AFL footballer. That's probably,
that's a really good head start. So.
There was the wise old grey-haired Simon Barthold once said, just get down to your local footy club. It might be the Puckapunyal Thirds, and just get involved. You're not going to get paid anything for it. You're not going to. It's going to be cold, wet, winter nights. But the more you get immersed in that environment, bouncing off the local physiotherapist there, and working with the players, and that's invaluable, that experience. And I think that's a really good tip for the graduate that wants to get into that sports mode, to try and just go to your local level and work your way up.
Nicki?
We've got I've got a new graduate that's working at my clinic, and she's going to start doing a little bit of work at Beaumaris Footy Club next week, which is our local team. Go down and just be around mainly with the junior players to start with, but hoping to do some screenings through there next year. And again, we share our templates, and we spoke at our meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago about whether we do up a standard screening template that, younger podiatrists or, people that want to get involved in teams can use to see what we actually have all found beneficial, and we'll all put that together, and then they can take that into the club as a bit of a starting point as well. But again, getting down, I started with doing some footwear talks and some screening with Werribee Footy Club, initially and enjoyed it. And then eventually, if you hang in there, the opportunity comes up to work with the more elite team.
Sure. Emma?
Look, my background, I was involved as, a wannabe athlete, a team manager, a coach, etc., in athletics and hockey and footy, etc. And I climbed the tree. So almost where Nicki's new grad is now. As a student, when I was at La Trobe, I was working with Old Zaverian Football Club and the state VAFA, the amateur state team initially. Then I progressed up to Box Hill Hawks, which is our tier 2, so the VFL. Left football.
That's my local team.
Oh, there you go. Left football for a few years because, yes, podiatry was busy and, my running career and things were busy. And then returned back to the AFL. So I literally have climbed up from, as you say, it's the cold, dark, windy sort of Tuesday night training at your amateur footy club, sort of going from amateurs to state teams to VFL up to AFL over the years. And it's you got to love what you do. It's a love of the sport and love of being involved in the team environment. So it's not just saying, hey, I want to work in a league sport. You've got to be the right sort of personality, I think, to fit into that model of a sports team and in sports environment, etc.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Actually, Emma, I won't say much about it, but I still remember you coming up to me and when you're in second year to ask a question about what the future held. But I won't say any more about that. I got one last question that's come in, and it's actually for you, Ian.
Oh no!
Which team do you think you'll now be supporting?
Go the Cats.
That's a good question, because all joking aside, and I mean this genuinely, I don't know how I get to watch it in the UK, but I'm gonna look into that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna start watching a bit more because it's just so much fun to watch. Generally speaking, I don't like to say I support a team unless I've seen them play. So the first one of you guys that wants to bring me over and put me in the stands, you're my team. You're my team.
I'm sure I will.
I was going to say.
Yeah. Well, actually, I've just given Footwork a little name drop. So when Art flies me over to Melbourne, business class, obviously, then I'll pick a Melbourne-based team, and I guess if it's Art, it'll be the Hawks, right? So, yeah, the mighty Hawks, as he refers to them. So,
okay.
I've just seen the person that asked that question said to me, has to be Roos. That's North Melbourne. I'm assuming.
Kangaroos.
Yeah,
Australian emblem.
Right, okay.
Come on.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a good note to finish on. So thanks so much, guys. I did actually notice in quite a few people from the UK watching. Aren't they supposed to be at work?
Absolutely.
There's quite a few names. Just looking.
I know several of them personally, so I'm gonna be dropping them a text saying, what's going on, because this might be the new time for us to do it, right? If
you guys don't work, days work. But thanks so much for those that have joined late. Just hang around for 5 more minutes. The whole video from the beginning will be rendered. It'll be up on YouTube. I'll probably put that up tomorrow morning for anyone who wants to watch it. So please watch it. So thanks everyone so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks, guys.
It's now past my bedtime because I normally get up and do these early in the morning. So I usually have to be in bed now. So thanks very much for joining us, everyone.